Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. My name is Constantine III, and welcome to my first impressions of the Vayne buffs. So, today we're going to be talking about the ADC meta and how it's going to change this patch. We're going to go over the buffs, we're going to talk about what this means for Vayne in terms of her build path, and what this means for Vayne in terms of her gameplay, because both those things change because of these buffs. Hope you guys enjoy, and let's get started. So there were a plethora of changes to ADCs this patch, but 3 of them were significant in terms of Vayne and her world in the ADC meta. Number 1, Jhin got nerfed. Jhin was a huge culprit to lane bullying for Vayne. With his early game DPS, huge amount of burst and ability to hit Vayne from a huge distance with trading and abilities via his bouncing grenade W and ult, Vayne was rendered helpless pretty much any time she was put against this guy in lane. And Ashe, for very similar reasons, would destroy Vayne, with the added advantage that if Ashe got destroyed in lane, she could still cream Vayne in the mid and late game with a well-placed ult. This, combined with the fact that Vayne now has a stronger laning phase when she maxes Tumble, means that she has a more realistic chance of being able to compete with these ADCs in the lane. You're never gonna win lane as Vayne, like always, but you won't exactly get utterly obliterated. If an enemy is grossly misplaying, you can actually punish them now because they're not so significantly stronger than you that it just wouldn't matter. So basically the bot lane meta has slowed down and Vayne has a better chance to do well in it. Now let's get on to the stuff we care about, what these buffs mean for her. First off, what exactly was this buff? Basically, Vayne's Tumble gets bonus damage that scales with her total amount of AD. So what does that mean? If you learn Tumble at level 1 and you press Q, you will receive a bonus amount of damage that's equal to 30% of your total attack damage. And the buff made it so that every time you level up your Q, instead of getting 5% extra bonus damage, you would get 10% extra bonus damage. So you do the math, you end up with 20% extra total damage at rank 5, meaning that level 9, a Tumble would deal an extra 20% amount of your maximum AD. From 50 to 70. So one big way to think about this is that the bonus damage on Tumble with 3 points in it is now equal to what Tumble bonus damage was at 5 points. So rather than having to wait till level 9 to hit your power spike with Q damage, you actually hit that same power spike at level 5. Which is, as you can tell, huge. That's a lot sooner. And at level 9, you get an extra 20% damage as compared to before, which is also pretty damn huge, especially if you have a Ghost Blade at that point. Then you're going to do huge damage of Tumble. Plus, this bonus damage scales with armor penetration, critical strike bonus damage from Infinity Edge, so it's actually a lot more significant than 20% if you look into it. Now, here's the thing. Let's talk about items real quick. Because maxing Tumble and Silver Bolts used to be a debatable decision, right? There were situations where, like I explained to you guys a bunch of times, sometimes maxing Silver Bolts is better, sometimes Q is maxing better, but now Q is good. Really good. Like, really, really good. Which means that maxing Q might just become core in every single situation because the damage is just so nuts. Furthermore, since the damage scales off of attack damage, that might mean that low AD starts like Bork might not be even viable by comparison anymore because Ghostblade / IE starts may be just that much better because of the extra AD. Speaking of BF into Zeal item into IE, that might be a new build. But these are all speculations, and I've only played about 7 games with these buffs, and these are all speculations, but again, first impressions, right? But as of now, Ghostblade into PD feels amazing. The armor pen scales with the bonus damage, tons of AD from Ghostblade to go with your Q, tons of extra tumble damage because of that, and the extra move speed from both PD and Ghostblade means that your dueling potential is absolutely off the charts. And, speaking of dueling, like the patch notes say, this Q buff really encourages Vayne to try and get into scraps earlier on in 1v1 and 2v1 situations. Preferably 2v2, but as you're seeing from the clips, you can 2v1 people if you know what you're doing. This is kind of important to understand because one of the main reasons why Vayne really struggled in this meta was because her team fighting was kind of bad. She couldn't actually get close to teamfights without getting one-shot by longer-range mages like Victor or Syndra. There's a lot of CC champions out there. So before you could actually go into a teamfight and really start doing your damage, you either had to wait for somebody to jump on you, or for everybody to use all of their CC and big burst damage, which meant that you missed out on like 5 or 6 seconds of dealing damage, which meant that other ADCs would always deal more damage, and your team would just lose before you could actually contribute anything, and blah blah blah. It was bad. But now you don't even have to teamfight anymore. I mean, you should if you should. But there is simply a greater option of dueling and split pushing and kind of being away from your team and really doing what Vayne was supposed to do from the very start, kind of be this lone wolf character that 1v1s people and displays her skill through dodging skill shots. This patch notes really surmised it perfect, and these Q buffs just let her do that better. So your playstyle should really be more looking for 1v1s of maxing Q with a heavy AD build, trying to pick off squishy targets by yourself, and by assassinating people as an ADC, opening up room for your team to do objectives with a numbers advantage. Now you can start contributing in more significant ways by dueling earlier into the game. And even in late game team fights, because of this Q buff, waiting to join fights won't hurt as much because your overall DPS is much higher. So essentially in the early game, you still want to be passive and wait to get stronger by getting a Ghost Blade, and then look for a pick or a duel throughout the mid game, get some picks, get some objectives off of that, use that to snowball your team into the late game with this potent hyper carry Vayne, engage in team fights then, play the team fight smart, wait for all the CC to be used, let it not matter because you'll be so far ahead of the enemy ADC from killing them once or twice that you can use that to win team fights even though you can't contribute much early, win the game. So here are my final thoughts. At first, I didn't think this buff was going to be that significant. Honestly, I saw it and I was like, that's kind of nice, that's generous of Riot, but Vayne still has shitty range and she's still going to be kind of a shitty character. I'll be honest with you guys, I was getting kind of despondent about the way the meta was. It felt really bad, the fact that I had to play this character to where I had a bad laning phase, I had a weak mid game, and I didn't have nearly as much utility as anyone else. And it just felt like that I really had just kind of hit this wall with the character. Like, I really couldn't do much more with her in the current state of the game. I mean, yes, I got to Diamond, but like once I got against competent players, it just felt impossible. But with these huge lane bullies nerfed, and every ADC not having crazy amounts of utility in their kit, and crazy amounts of range with crazy amounts of DPS and a crazy good early game, plus Vayne getting stronger at dueling, I think she might be able to wedge her way, not back into the meta, but be much more viable than she used to be. I truly think that these buffs will kind of leave her in a spot where she always should be. A rarely picked, good and only exceptionally skilled hands that is used to display your skill against enemies and allow you to solo carry the game and just be really enjoyable to play while not being impossible to win with. Anyway, guys, that'll be all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure to like and subscribe and share the video if you found it interesting. Also, why not leave your thoughts about the buffs in the comments section? Do you think it was enough? You think she's viable again? Or is she still going to be kind of this underpicked, underwhelming champion? Anyway, take it easy, guys. See you later.